Hello, and welcome to my presentation on how the current climate change effects have affected the natural disaster intensity of the world. So, climate change. As we've talked about it in our class so far, we know that it is anthropogenic, which is a human cause, and also typically is referred to as global warming. And so, as you can see in my chart here to the right, it shows the increase of temperatures over time, and that plays into the changed intensity of natural disasters. Here on this slide kind of shows why people are looking at this issue. This graph shows the meteorological, hydrological, and climatological changes that have occurred since 1980 up until this graph is in 2016. And so that is what inspired these articles that I am going to be talking about. So what is a natural disaster? Typically when we refer to this, we refer to, in the Midwest, we think of tornadoes and severe storms, but also this refers to hurricanes, tropical storms, floods, wildfires, drought, earthquakes, and tsunamis, which also can kind of relate to volcanic activity as well. I wanted to throw this chart in there to kind of show you where these natural disasters are occurring and what kind of natural disaster it is that is occurring in each location. As we can see, some are more prominent in other areas, and that affects the article research and natural disaster and climate research in general. So the first article that I evaluated was the Climate Change, Natural Disasters, and Migration, which is a survey of empirical evidence. And this shows migration patterns in humans caused by this inclination of natural disasters. And so there's a couple quotes here out of the article. You can pause and read those if you need to. And then, but primarily what we're looking at, the most impactful natural disasters right now are droughts, wildfires, floods, and tropical storms is what they touch on in this article. The droughts are more likely to be increasing in like large parts of Africa, the Mediterranean region, parts of North and South America, and Southeastern Asia. This normally brings on wildfires as well as floods in lower lying parts such as Maldives. The reason that they mention this in the article is it has cause for migration and inequality. So people are having to move and leave their homes because of climate change causing these natural disasters to impact their way of life. Another issue in this article that is discussed is the effect of rising temperatures and the cause of seismic movement, increased seismic movement. This is caused by glacial melting, and that reduces the weight on the crust and therefore allowing faults to slide more easily, which has led to an increase in earthquake activity as well as tsunamis and volcanic eruptions, which also have to do with seismic movement. The Energy Events Database, or EMDAT, is a really great source for disaster data. They have recorded 22,000 events of natural disasters since the 1900s, including even like the Dust Bowl and earthquakes happening in like 1906. So this is a really trustworthy source that they have cited that shows the trend of increasing disaster occurrences. So please feel free to stop and look at this graph, as it's a really great visual. The second article that I referenced was exploring the relationship between rising temperatures and the number of climate-related natural disasters in China. And this is specific to the correlation between temperatures and disasters in China. It examined the overall trends of the cycle and the temperature of rise to drop level. So, over time, climate tends to rise, it tends to drop. But as we can see, actually, on the next slide, we'll see that the temperature is rising much more than it's dropping, so it's never returning to that normal temperature, and that's increasing these natural disasters in China. This article had a lot of really great studies, including kind of looking at that rise and drop periods. So on this slide, you might want to take a moment to pause and look at these graphs and see the correlation between the increasing temperatures and the rise and drop periods, and then also just looking at the rise periods versus the duration of the drop periods. there's many more rise periods than there's 2004 to 2010, like there's 8 rise periods, and then there's also only 3 drop periods. So that impacts the temperature and also natural disasters. Whereas the last 2 studies or articles were very informative about what has already happened and what is going to be continuing to happen, this article was really great about, touching on what's already happened, as things in the aforementioned studies, such as drought, floods, tropical cyclones. But also this study, they had a table with projections of what could come, and it also puts that thought in your mind of what is the uncertainty that we don't know yet that is still going to be affected, like what happens whenever we have more glacial melting and there's more seismic movement. This study really put that uncertainty and almost concern into your head. Another topic that this third article touched on was the lasting impacts of natural disasters, and not just their initial blow. Something such as flooding and sea level rising impacts ecosystems such as coral reefs and mangroves. And in other areas of the world where there are previous disasters, such as war, like in Africa, there's AIDS, and or just an area that's impoverished, a mild drought may have very considerable impacts compared to, say, a mild drought in California. So that's when we have to switch over, and this article touches on preparing for disaster risk. So that's where we would end up in the mitigation phase and the preparedness phase, since we can't turn around what we have caused with climate change so far, and it's likely to continue for a while. We just have to take a stance on preparedness, and that's something I found interesting in this third article, is just kind of dealing with what's already been done. And so that's kind of what this chart over here kind of shows, the phases of disaster management, and we would be hopefully in the mitigation phase, but more likely the preparedness phase. So in conclusion, the evidence from all 3 of these articles show that there is in fact a correlation between global warming and other forms of climate change, and these intense natural disasters and their more prominent occurrence. The other thing that these studies show is that the climate will be continuing to change even after we reach goals such as those stated in the Paris Agreement. So even after we reach these goals and start to limit our impact, the climate will still be continuing to change from the damage that's already been done. And then also what some of these articles talked about was the inequality of those in these areas affected by increased natural disasters. As we know, sustainability also refers to the social and economical issue, not just environmental. And so with these increased natural disasters, this inequality comes to these areas, and these people are often, live a hard life, or they're even displaced from what's always been their home. So these are all things that I found in these articles, and things that I hope you guys enjoyed learning about. The graphs in these articles are really great to reference for everything. So yeah, make sure you look at those. Lastly, if anyone wants to look at these articles, I found them on the Maryville Library. So these are the citations for those if you want to go and check them out. Thank you for listening.